Okay, so this week's Parshas Yisro, the Shiur today is sponsored in honor of my birthday. People sponsored it, so that's so nice. From the Tuesday and Thursday Shiur, sponsored in honor of my birthday. Thank you so much. And also, this is me, I wanted to sponsor it, Li'ilui Nishmas, Rachel Feld's father, who just passed away. Rachel's been a shiur goer from the very beginning, from even before I started this shiur here, when I was in Tenafly. Rachel Feld was coming to my shiurim, so she's from the OGs. She's from the very beginning, and so I want to sponsor the shiur Li'ilui Nishmas, her father, who the Levaya was yesterday, and what an incredible man. So his name was Simcha ben Tzvi Elimelech, so the shiur should be Elias and Neshama for him, and should be Elias and Neshama for him, and he should be a good better for his whole family, and the family should be comforted together with all the mourners of Zion Yerushalayim. Amen. Okay, so let's begin. Parshas Yisro. Parshas Yisro. This is, if you pick out one parsha from the entire Torah and say what is the most important parsha, if you could even speak like that or say that, it would be Parshas Yisro. It's Matan Torah. Without Matan Torah, everything else is non-existent. So this is the parsha where Klal Yisrael receives the Torah. So obviously, there's a lot. I mean, one of the things I really love to do in this shiur is really sort of go underneath the surface. You know, we all sort of understand the surface level story, but when we look underneath the surface, we see that there's so many layers of messaging in the Torah, in the Parshas, so just beyond the superficial. There are so many layers and depths of the messages and of the lessons and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to communicate to us. And we could see this oftentimes through various underlying sort of thematic connections between different parts of the parsha, of what the messaging is and what the lessons are. And so that's really what I want to focus on today. An underlying message in Parshas Yisro, the parsha where Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Torah. So I want to begin with the very beginning of the parsha. And I'm going to, for those of you who are here on Zoom, I'm going to pull up my screen and we're just going to take a look at the very first pasuk in the parsha. Okay, so here we go, right here. So the very first pasuk in the parsha, if you're on Zoom, you can see it on your screen. So the parsha begins, this parsha of Matan Torah. I once gave a whole sermon or a sermon or a shiur on why the parsha of Matan Torah, perhaps the most important parsha in the entire Torah, is called Yisro, right? Not even a Jew. I mean, he became a Jew, became a convert, but I would think it would be fitting to call this parsha Moshe, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, or Parshas HaTorah. Why it's called Parshas Yisro? Okay, that's a class in and of itself, a separate class, but fascinating exploration into why the parsha is called by the name of Yisro, who at this point wasn't even Jewish. He's coming now to convert to Judaism. And that's actually exactly where our parsha begins. So the entire parsha of Matan Torah begins with the story of Yisro coming to join Klal Yisrael at this experience of Matan Torah, or post Matan Torah. Something happens where, and this is exactly where our parsha opens, where Yisro hears about the experience of the Jewish people, the experience of the Exodus, and he's compelled to come and leave Midian and come and join the Jewish people. And this is where our parsha opens up. The parsha begins, Vayishma Yisro, that Yisro hears. Vayishma Yisro Kayin Midian, Chesen Moshe, that Yisro, the Kayin Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe, he hears, Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe LiYisrael Amli. He hears everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done with Moshe and with the Jewish people. Ki Heitzi Hashem es Yisro Mitzrayim, as Hashem has taken the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. So Yisro hears about this Yetzias Mitzrayim experience that we just went through, Parshas Boy, Parshas Peshalach, the previous Parshas. Yisro hears this, And what exactly did Yisro hear? So the pasuk says clearly, Kol asher asa Elokim l'Moshe l'Yisrael. He hears everything. He hears it all. He hears about the Makkos. He hears about Makkos Dam and Svardeya and Kinim and Orev and Dever. He hears about all of the Makkos. He hears about Makkos Becheres. He hears about Kriyas Yamsul. He hears about everything, and this causes him to come join the Jewish people. I mean, Yisro was a seeker of spirituality. He was a Kohen Midjan. He was a real theologian. He knew all of the idolatry. He himself practiced idolatry and searching for truth. But somehow, something compels him to now want to become a Jew, to leave all of the idolatry behind and want to become a Jew. And all the Torah tells us is, what does he hear? Kol asher asa Elokim l'Moshe l'Yisrael. He hears everything. What's fascinating is that Rashi, who normally comes to explain a vacuum in our understanding, Rashi says, if you look at the Rashi, the very first Rashi, V'yishma Yisro, ma shmua shma'u ba, what exactly did Yisro hear, says Rashi? Kriyas Yamsuf u'melchamas hamalek. He heard two things. Kriyas Yamsuf, he heard about the miracle of the Yamsuf, splitting of the sea, and melchamas hamalek, which was in last week's Parsha. That after the Jews left the Har Sinai, they journeyed from the Torah, Amalek attacked them. And the Jews were victorious in that. It was a very tough attack. And we all know the story. Moshe would raise his hands. The Jewish people were victorious. When he'd lower his hands, Amalek would get the upper hand. And eventually the Jews won that war. And so Rashi tells us this is what Yisro hears. So the obvious question is, Rashi seems to be contradicting the pasuk. The first verse. The verse says, Yisro hears everything. Kol asher asa Elokim l'Moshe. And Rashi says, no, not everything. But it was specifically Kriyas Yamsuf and melchamas hamalek. So normally Rashi comes to explain the pasuk, not contradict the pasuk. So how do we understand Rashi? And I think the simplest explanation is what the pasuk is telling us is that Yisro did hear everything. However, it wasn't everything. It wasn't all of the details that compelled Yisro to actually come and join Klal Yisrael, to abandon idolatry and become a Jew. And this is what Rashi's answer. Ma shmua shma'u ba'u. This is what Rashi says. Not only what did he hear, but what did he hear uba'u and caused him to come? What caused him? What compelled him to join the Jewish people? It was specifically these two elements. Kriyas Yamsuf and melchamas hamalek. Why? Why not Makkos Dam or Tzvardeya or Kinim or Makkos Becheres or any of the miracles that happened? Yisro heard them all. But what Rashi is coming to explain to us, and this is a critical Rashi to really, if we want to understand the deeper message of what the Torah is trying to tell us here, that it was specifically to, yes, Yisro heard it all, and he was affected by it all. But it was, I am recording. Meirav reminded me because you weren't here. So what Rashi's coming to tell us is it was specifically these two miracles that compelled Yisro. So what was unique about melchamas hamalek and Kriyas Yamsuf that's why Yisro joined the Jewish people? So that's question number one. Try to understand that first Rashi. What is Rashi coming to tell us here? What's also interesting is that when Yisro comes, a few verses later, let's go down to Pasuk Yud in in the first Aliyah. When Yisro comes and Moshe and he meets Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe tells him all of these things that happen. So we see Yisro gives a fascinating response. Says Pasuk Yud, Vayomer Yisro, and Yisro responded. Yisro said to hearing all of this, Baruch Hashem, which by the way, Yisro is the first person to ever say Baruch Hashem. This is the first trivia question at your Shabbos table. Who's the first person to ever say Baruch Hashem? Yisro in this week's Parsha. This is where we get it from Yisro, which is also a shiur in and of itself. That Yisro is the first person to say, not Avraham Avinu, not Yitzchak, not Yaakov, Yosef, the Shvatim. Yisro is the first person to say Baruch Hashem. Okay. So Vayomer Yisro Baruch Hashem. That's not what I want to focus on. What I want to focus on is what Yisro says next. Vayomer Yisro Baruch Hashem asher hitzel eschem yad Mitzrayim. Yisro says, blessed is Hashem who saves you miyad Mitzrayim, umiyad Paroi, from the hands of Mitzrayim, from the hand of Paroi, asher hitzel sa'am who saves the Jewish people mitachas yad Mitzrayim. 3 times in that pasuk, when Yisro is thanking Hashem, saying Baruch Hashem, he says 3 times, miyad Mitzrayim, thank you. He praises God for saving us from the hand of Egypt. Miyad Parai, from the hands of Parai. Ubetachas Yad Mitzrayim, and the second time, again, Yad Mitzrayim. 3 times Yisro says the word Yad there in that pasuk. It's bizarre. He keeps repeating this, and it seems superfluous. It would be more understood, or it would be seemingly the same way understood if you would say, Asher Hitzil Eschem Mimitzrayim Umeparai, who saved us from Egypt and from Parai. What's miyad Mitzrayim? Miyad Parai. Mitachas yad Mitzrayim. What is Yisro stressing with yad? 3 times. I mean, if the Torah repeats it 3 times in the same verse, obviously that is it calling out to us. Darsheni, explain me, right? That's clearly calling out to us. So what is that yad Mitzrayim? Okay. That's what I want to focus on today. And as we develop the answer for this, why Kriyas Yamsuf and Muhammad Samolik, and why is Yisro say over and over again Yad Par, Yad Mitzrayim? This will give us an entire understanding of the really an underlying theme in the Parsha of Matan Torah. So let's try to begin the answer to this. And I want to begin with stepping away from the Parsha for a second, and we're going to bring it back to the Parsha. But I want to talk about the very first bracha that we say every morning, that every Jew says every morning. What's the very first bracha that we say? Is Al Netilas Yadayim, right? We wash our hands, right? And we say Moda'ani, but Moda'ani isn't a bracha. The first bracha, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech Elam, the first bracha every Jew says first thing in the morning, right? We wash our hands and we say Al Netilas Yadayim. What's the translation of that? How would you translate Al Netilas Yadayim? Because what are we doing? We're washing our hands. But Netila doesn't mean washing, right? So seemingly it should say Al Rechitzas Yadayim, right? The washing of the hands. But that's not what we're saying. We say Al Netilas Yadayim. What does Netilas Yadayim mean? So the Rishonim speak about this, and there's different understandings and explanations what exactly the word natal means. Natal means to take. But many of the Rishonim say that natal means to elevate, to lift up, to elevate. And this is what we're doing. You know, one of the explanations, there's various explanations as to why do we wash our hands first thing in the morning? So one explanation, the simple explanation is there's a ruach hatuma that our neshama leaves, goes up to Gan Eden. There's only a kista d'chiyusa, it says in the Zohar, only a sliver of life left in the body while we're sleeping that keeps us alive. That the vast part of our neshama actually ascends to the Bezdin Shomayla every night as we sleep and makes a cheshbon nefesh, makes a calculation of the previous day. And so therefore, since the soul left the body and only left a sliver of life, when the soul returns to the body, there's a ruach of tuma that's still left in the body, that's still left on the hands, and then we wash our hands. That eliminates, that cleanses the ruach hatuma. That's one explanation. But the second explanation that's given is, why do we wash our hands? Is for the same reason that the Kohanim would wash their hands when they would begin the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. They would sanctify their hands. Our hands represent our actions, right? That's what hands represent. So the Kohen, the first thing the Kohen would do in the Beis HaMikdash before he began the Avodah was he would wash his hands like we wash in the morning in the same way. Yeah. And to signify the symbolism is that they're sanctifying their actions to Hashem. They're sanctifying themselves, their strength, their actions, and they're serving Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. So in a very real way, we begin our day sanctifying our hands. We are all Kohanim serving Hashem in this Beis HaMikdash that we call the world, right? Today we have no Beis HaMikdash. Today our Beis HaMikdash today is our hearts, our minds, our tables, our homes. So we begin our day elevating our hands, sanctifying hands. That's all Netilas Yadayim. This concept of raising our hands or elevating our hands, where do we see this We see this by the war with Amalek, right? When Moshe Rabbeinu was battling Amalek, or I should say, Klal Yisrael was battling Amalek, and as I mentioned before, when were we victorious? When Moshe Rabbeinu would elevate his hands. And the Mishnah in Masechta Sota asks this question: what is this? Some kind of magic? What is that about Moshe Rabbeinu raising his hands? When he raised his hands, Klal Yisrael would get the upper hand. When he'd lower his hands, Amalek would get the upper hand. So literally, he had to keep his hands raised in order for the Jews to find victory in the war. So the question is, what was it about Moshe Rabbeinu raising his hands? The Gemara Masechta Sota, the Mishnah asks this question: did Moshe Rabbeinu's hands decided it? Moshe Rabbeinu elevating his hands, and the Gemara answers over there, was ultimately caused Klal Yisrael to look upwards towards Shemayim. And that's what the Gemara explains. That when they looked upwards, when they looked to Hashem for their salvation, when they recognized and realized that there's more to this world than just the laws of nature, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls it, when they looked upwards, similar to in Parshas Chukas with the snake on the pole, right? When there was a disease that was running through Klal Yisrael because of their behavior, and Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to put the serpent on the staff, and whoever looked at the serpent when they're bitten by the snakes, they would survive. It wasn't the serpent that caused them to survive; it was looking upward towards Hashem. That was the idea. Okay, so the same thing here with Milchama Amalek. The idea of Moshe Rabbeinu elevating his hands was the idea of Klal Yisrael looking upwards towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what's interesting is this whole idea of Amalek is connected with hands, because it says that when did Amalek attack us? When we left Rephidim, right? When we left Rephidim. So the Chazal say Rephidim is made up of two words, Rafu Yadayim. Rafu Yadayim means our hands became weak. Rafa Yadayim is Rephidim. When our hands became weak, and the Chazal explained, what does it mean we left Rephidim? That we were leaving Har Sinai. We were leaving the Torah experience. And apparently there were some Jews who left the Torah experience, perhaps a lot of Jews who left the Torah experience, as excited as they were to receive the Torah, when they received all the responsibilities, there were some Jews who were happy to leave Matan Torah, who were happy to leave that experience of having all of that responsibility. There was a weakness in their dedication to Torah when they were leaving Har Sinai. That's what Rephidim alludes to, Rafa Yadayim. Their hands became weak. They were leaving their dedication to Torah, and that's when Amalek attacked them. So this is what the Chazal says. So it's fascinating, because this whole war with Amalek is connected to this idea of hands. Rephidim, Rafa Yadayim, we were attacked when our hands were soft, and when Moshe Rabbeinu elevated his hands, that's when we were victorious. Again, what is this idea of hands? And we see this, as I said, in the beginning of the Parsha, where Yisro thanks Hashem for saving us from the hand of Mitzrayim, from the hand of Parai, from the hand of Mitzrayim. So obviously there's messaging here, and this is our job, to try to discover what it is. So in order to really figure out what is the messaging here of Amalek and the connection with hands, and what is Yisro saying over and over again, I want to share with you a Chassam Sofer about the experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the overall experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So says the Chassam Sofer, and it's not only the Chassam Sofer, others say this as well, but he explains it in beautiful detail, is that the exodus of Mitzrayim, the experience of Galus Mitzrayim, it was obviously more than just a physical enslavement of the Jewish people and a physical liberation of the Jewish people. There was clearly a spiritual element here as well, a psychological element here as well. What Mitzrayim tried to do, what the philosophy of Egypt, which started permeating the Jewish consciousness. As we know, and we speak about this all the time, at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Jews were sunk into the absolute moral, psychological, spiritual depravity of Egypt. They were in, as the Kabbalah tells us, the Mem Tesh Shari Tuma, the 49 gates of impurity. Had they stayed there 1 second longer, they would have been irredeemable. They were on such a low spiritual state. What was it? What was it about the Egyptian consciousness that caused the Jews to sink so low. And so the Chassam Sofer explains, it wasn't just Egyptian idolatry that they became connected to, that they did, but it was Egyptian philosophy as well. And the Egyptian philosophy on life was that ultimately, and this was a philosophy of many ruling classes, that there was a eternal caste system of there were higher nations and there were lower nations. Ultimately, if you were the Jewish people were born to be slaves. This was the Egyptian mindset. Their actions don't matter. Their actions are irrelevant. There's nothing they can ever do to escape slavery. This is their destiny. And ultimately, wherever we are, that is our destiny. If we're born into a ruling class, that's our destiny. If we're born into a slave class, that's our destiny. Our actions, our mindset, plays no role and makes ultimate no difference in the world. This is part of the Avodas Perech, that it describes that the Egyptians enslaved us with Avodas Perech, which means backbreaking labor. But it wasn't just physically backbreaking labor. The most backbreaking labor is labor where your actions don't matter. And one of the things the Medrash says, one of the things that the Egyptians would do is they would cause Jews to build structures, pyramids, on sand that would ultimately sink. Meaning that the Jews couldn't even take pride in the buildings that they built, in the structures that they built, because they would sink. The message was, your actions are meaningless. Your actions are worthless. They confer no importance whatsoever, and they absolutely will not affect any change at all in who you are, in the world. All of our actions are meaningless. Everything is already preordained. You're part of a slave class, and you'll never get out of that slave class. This consciousness had so permeated the Jewish mind that even going forward, even fast forwarding it, when we do get out of Egypt, later on in the Midbar, this entire generation has to die in the Midbar, because the slave mentality, they could not leave their consciousness. They could not be the nation that goes into Eretz Yisrael. That's why a new generation had to be born in the Midbar, and the new generation that didn't experience slavery, they were able to go into Eretz Yisrael. So this mindset of our actions are meaningless is obviously the complete antithesis of everything that Torah teaches us. The complete antithesis of Judaism. Judaism teaches us the exact opposite, that we were put here because our actions matter, because we do make a difference, because every single one of us has a purpose and has a mission and has a shlichus. And we need to know our actions do matter, and matter incredibly. This, says the Chassam Sofer, this was Golus Mitzrayim. The real message of Golus Mitzrayim is our actions don't matter. Whatever we do has no effect at all. And so comes Yetzias Mitzrayim. And Hashem tells us the entire point of Yetzias Mitzrayim was what? Matan Torah experience, right? As Moshe Rabbeinu tells Paroi from the very beginning. We're going out, not just to go out, not just to be free, to serve Hashem on Har Sinai. The entire Yetzias Mitzrayim was for the Matan Torah experience. And what happens at Matan Torah? Hashem tells us, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Tzichem Eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, the very first commandment. What is that commandment? It's not a commandment. It seems to be a statement. It seems like the commandments come next. Lo yilucha elokim acherim al panai. You shouldn't have worship idols. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher tzichem eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. What's the commandment? It's a statement, but it is a commandment. The commandment is to believe in Hashem, but not just to believe in Hashem, that Hashem exists way out there. But if you'll notice, even though Hashem is speaking to millions of Jews, at the Aseret Dibros, at the Ten Commandment experience in our Parsha, he says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, singular, not Elokechem, plural, which is how it should be said. When you're speaking the plurals, Ani Hashem Elokechem. But he speaks, Ani Hashem Elokecha. He speaks to each and every individual Jew. It's not just a belief in Hashem, but a belief that Hashem is Elokecha, is your God, and has conferred upon you. Elokecha means has conferred upon you godliness. It's not just that your actions make a difference, but in fact, your actions, your hands are now godly. Make a godly difference in the world. Bring Kedusha to the world. That your hands are literally in the place of Hashem. You are my messengers in the world. You are my messengers to confer godliness in the world. Ani Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem Elokecha, the source of your Elokus, the source of your godliness. I am conferring upon you at this moment to become my messengers to bring godliness to the world. Not only do your actions matter, the exact opposite of the Egyptian mindset and theology. Not only do your actions matter, but your actions are elukus, your actions are godly. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us at Matan Torah. So this, says the Chassam Sofer, this is the entire Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is the messaging of the entire Exodus experience. That our actions not just matter, but our actions are godly. That we didn't just experience physical liberation, but it's so much deeper than that. It's spiritual liberation. It's liberation from the mindset that we're just on this hamster wheel of life and that ultimately nothing matters at all. To the contrary, everything matters. Every action matters. Every thought matters. Every word matters. Every action matters. So this is the Chassam Sofer says later on in Parshas Bamidbar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Ani Hashem Elokeichem, asher yitziskem me'eretz Mitzrayim, lios lachem le'elokim." I took you out, lios lachem le'elokim. That not just that I should be your God, but that I can confer godliness upon you. That's why I took you out. That's what the point of Yetzias Mitzrayim is, that you are godly. So it's not only that your actions matter, but your actions are godly. This is Yetzias Mitzrayim. And now, let's go back to our first pasuk. Vayishma Yisro. Yisro hears. And what does Rashi say Yisro hears? He hears Milchamas Amalek, and he hears Kriyas Yamsuf. What was it specifically about those two elements that's what caused Yisro to come? Those two things, Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchamas Amalek, were done specifically with the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu. Milchamas Amalek, Moshe Rabbeinu lifted up his hands, and then the Jewish people were victorious. By Kriyas Yamsuf, Hashem tells him, take away your staff and put your hand over the Nata es Yadcha. Harem es Matcha, take away your staff and place your hand over Kriyas Yamsuf, and that will split the sea. It was done with Moshe Rabbeinu's hand. Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchamas Amalek were the two miracles that were done directly with Moshe Rabbeinu's hand. In other words, the messaging was clear in Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchamas Amalek. Our hands, meaning our actions, not only matter, not only can make a difference, but can split seas, can win wars. Who has the capacity to win wars and split seas? Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Those are in the realm of godliness. To win a war against Amalek, this militarized nation, when we're this tiny nomadic tribe that just left Mitzrayim with no weapons and barely struggling to survive, that is a miracle that we won that war with Amalek. That's Hashem who brings that victory. Who could split the sea? Hashem could split the sea. And yet it was done with Moshe Rabbeinu's hands, those two things. What was the message? That Moshe Rabbeinu's hands were godly. And this was the message of Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is the message that caused Yisro to come. That our hands, our actions make a difference in the world. Not only make a difference, but confer godliness upon the world. This is the message that compelled Yisro to come. This is what made Yisro want to be a Jew. That we make a difference. That we are Hashem's messengers to bring godliness to the world. That our hands, our actions, our thoughts, our speech, everything we do matters. Everything we do makes a difference. And this is why Rashi says, Ma shmu shmo ba. Yisro heard everything, says the Torah. But what caused him to come? Knowing that our hands make a difference. And that's why, what does Yisro respond? Baruch Hashem, that he saved you miyad Mitzrayim, miyad Paray, mitachas yad Mitzrayim. Baruch Hashem that Hashem saved you from the mindset of the hands of Mitzrayim, the hands of what was their mindset? That our hands mean nothing, that our hands don't confer any meaning whatsoever, that our actions are meaningless and worthless, that our lives have no deeper meaning at all. So this is why Yisro says, Miyad Mitzrayim, Miyad Parah, Miyad Mitzrayim. Baruch Hashem that you were saved from that mindset. This is what caused Yisro to come. This is what Hashem is telling us in the first of the Aseres Dibros. So this is why our very first bracha of the day is what? All Natilas Yadayim. Every single day we're meant to inculcate within our mindset, within our consciousness, that our hands are elevated, that our hands matter, that our actions matter. And this is the underlying message of the entire Parsha of Matan Torah, of the entire Torah experience is a message to Klal Yisrael. I'm not just taking you out just to be free, just to no longer be under physical servitude. I'm taking you out and I'm giving you the Torah and I'm giving you the underlying message. And this is the message that every single one of us has to live with, that our actions matter, that our what we do with our hands, what we do with our speech, what we do with our all matter and play an incredible role in the entire trajectory of the universe. And Hashem speaks this and gives this message not just to the nation as a whole, because you might think, well, it's true. It's true as a whole. As a whole, the Jewish nation matters. But me as an individual, what am I? I'm just one single irrelevant speck of dust in this massive universe. And that's why Hashem says, in the very first communication to the world, to Klal Yisrael, the opening up the Torah, the 10 Commandments, the very first communication was, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, your individual, your God. You matter. That's the very beginning of Torah. You matter. You as an individual. The fact that you were born is a Kadosh Baruch Hu's message to you that you're in the neshama, that your soul has certain gifts, certain talents, certain strengths, certain abilities that will contribute and must contribute to the world, to bring the world to its ultimate trajectory, to the messianic redemption. And that there's no other Jew, no other human being who ever lived and whoever will live that can give to the world what you can give. So it's not just our nation as a whole matters. It's every single individual in the nation matters. This is what it means, Yad. This is Al Natilas Yadayim. This is the consciousness that we permeate ourselves with every single morning. And so this is the message of Parshas Yisro. And I think it's such an important message for us today. You know, today, especially today, when here we are, so many months after October 7th, and we still have our brothers and sisters are still being held hostage, and our nation is still in danger, and our soldiers are still battling for us. Who would have ever thought that it would have been this long? Maybe people did think so. I certainly didn't think this. And after it drags on day after day, and week after week, and month after month, and we did our gatherings and our tehillims and our davenings and our extra mitzvahs and our extra shiurim, and we're doing it all, and yet we still see there doesn't seem to be any movement. We're still being held hostage. Our nation is still in danger. Our soldiers we're still getting these horrific reports every day about our soldiers. And in the entire across Eretz Israel, people are sitting shiva from top to bottom, from north to south. And it's when we start to feel, does anything matter? Do my actions matter? Do I make a difference? Comes Parshas Yisro and tells us absolutely, with 100% certainty, this is the entire message of Matan Torah. That we don't always see it immediately, but we should know every action we do absolutely matters and brings godliness into the world and brings goodness into the world and will make a difference in the world. This is the first commandment. Anochi Hashem Elokecha is our belief, not just belief that God exists out there somewhere. Anochi Hashem Elokecha is much deeper than that. It's not just that God exists, but that he confers upon you, Elokecha, your godliness, and that your actions matter. And this is the message of the Parsha of Matan Torah. This is the message that every single one of us needs to live with. That ultimately we have to live with purpose, and we have to live with meaning, and we have to know that everything we do, sai l'tov and sai the opposite. Everything we do changes the entire trajectory of the world. We either bring the world one step closer to Mashiach or one step further. For a Jew, there's no middle ground. Every action we do matters, and every action we do is profound, and every action we do ultimately brings the world to the coming of Mashiach. So Amir Hashem, every one of us should take the message of Parshas Yisro, the message of Yisro, and perhaps this is why the Parsha is named Yisro, after somebody who wasn't even Jewish, who came to join the Jewish people, because Yisro is the first one to express this idea. Not just he's the first one to say Baruch Hashem, but in that same pasuk where he says Baruch Hashem, he expresses this idea 3 times. Miyad Parei, Miyad Mitzrayim, Miyad Mitzrayim, Miyad Parei, Mitachas Yad Mitzrayim. Yisro is the first one to express this Yad, that our Yad matters. And we shouldn't be influenced by the philosophy of Yad Mitzrayim, that our Yad doesn't matter, but that our hands matter and our actions matter. And this is why the Parsha is named Yisro. He's the one who expressed this. So Amir Hashem, every one of us will redouble our efforts in bringing our hostages home and in protecting our brethren in Eretz Yisrael and wherever they may be. And Amir Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show us. When we act, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reacts. When we live with meaning and with purpose and with the understanding that our actions make a difference, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should respond and show us all that our actions make a difference, and bring our hostages home and bring our soldiers home in safety and in victory. And Amir Hashem, we should all be zeichet to see. It says when Mashiach comes, every time we do a mitzvah now, it's a mitzvah, but we don't see it. But every mitzvah that we do, we're bringing down kedusha into the world. And when Mashiach comes, every single one of us will see exactly what we contributed, our contribution to the Elokus that's in the world, to the coming of Mashiach. We will all be able to see all of the godliness that we individually accomplished and brought down into the world, with everything that our hands brought down into the world. So Amir Hashem, who's living with the message of Parshas Yisro, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should respond and should send us Mashiach so that we can see the Einei Basar, with our physical eyes, all of the kedusha that we all brought down into the world, and we should be zeicha to the iskalos and Mashiach Tzidkenu b'imheir v'yameinu amen. Okay, let's going to say Tehillim as we do every week. Yes. Because Netilat means to uplift, and that's what many of the Rishonim say. Yes, that's exactly why. That's exactly why. Now we know. That's exactly why. That is exactly why. Okay, so let's do Tehillim 121. We'll do it together. Now we know why we lift up our hands when we say Al Nitiyas Yadayim. That's exactly right. Okay, so Tehillim 121. Shir Lamaloi Sesayinai Harimi Ayin Yavo Ezri Mi Madinai Eis Shemayim Diaretz. Ayitein Lamoid Raglecha Yanim Shemrecha Hinel Yanim Leishan Shem Yisrael Adinai Shemrecha Nitzilcha Yad Yaminecha Yem Amashemesh Leikacha V'Yireach B'Layla Adonai Yishmarcha Mikara Yishmer Es Nafshecha Adonai Yishmer Teisecha V'Yecha Mi'ata V'Yad Elam. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Amir Hashem. We'll be back next week. Thank you, everybody.